Welcome everyone to ManageEngine Patch Tuesday webinar for the month of November 2024. As we enter November, a month that reminds us to pause and give thanks, it's also an ideal time to reflect on the importance of safeguarding what matters most, our data. Just as we prepare our homes and hearts for the holiday season, we must also strengthen our cybersecurity defenses to protect against ever evolving threats. Folks, it's time to enhance our security by applying the latest patches and updates in this month's Patch Tuesday. With immense gratitude, we express our delight at having you all join us on this fine morning. Let's get ready for an insightful session. Before we move on, I just want to double check. Can you hear me clearly and is my presentation visible? If everything's good, just give me a quick thumbs up in the chat so we can keep things rolling. Great. Thank you, participants, for your response. I'm Niveda, product expert at ManageEngine and a presenter today. Alongside me, we have our patch pundit ready to engage with you in real time via chat. So please feel free to post your questions throughout the webinar. Kindly note that it will be a 60-minute webinar and it is being recorded. The recorded session will be sent to your registered email IDs in 2 to 3 working days. So what's on the agenda for today's session? First up, we will have a detailed breakdown of the Windows life cycle as well as the end of life dates for the various Windows versions. Next, we'll be discussing the Patch Tuesday updates for the month of November. And then we'll also be demonstrating how you can simplify the patch management process for your network's endpoints using ManageEngine's patch management solution. Followed by that, we will also be sharing some of the best practices for patching that you can follow to perform patch management for your hybrid networks. And last but not the least, as always, we'll have a question and answer session wherein we'll be addressing all your queries. All right, so let us take a look at the Windows lifecycle. So folks, if you're still running Windows 10, here's an important heads up. Its active support end will officially end on October 14, 2025. That means after that date, no more security updates or feature improvements. So if you haven't already, it's definitely time to start planning your upgrade to Windows 11 before support runs out. But don't worry, if you are already using Endpoint Central for patch management, you're in a great position to handle this transition smoothly. Let me walk you through how it can simplify the entire upgrade process for you. On the home page, you'll see ZIA analysis. This feature is super helpful when making the move from Windows 10 to 11. It gives you insights like which Windows 10 devices are reaching end of life and which ones are ready to upgrade to Windows 11. Plus, you'll get other useful info to guide you along the way. For more details on how to get started, check out the links shared by our panelists in the chat. At ManageEngine, we are excited to share that you can easily initiate the feature pack update through Patch Manager Plus. For step-by-step instructions on upgrading to the latest feature pack, just check out the forum link shared in the chat. Don't wait too long. Upgrading to the latest version is definitely the way to go. Moving on to Patch Tuesday update breakdown. So this time there are 89 vulnerabilities, out of which 4 are zero-day vulnerabilities. We'll be discussing them in the later slides. But taking a look at the breakdown, we see a total of 192 patches released to mitigate the 89 vulnerabilities. Also, if these vulnerabilities are left unpatched in your endpoints, they can cause 6 different kinds of impacts in your systems, which we'll also be discussing in detail in the following slides. So as I said earlier, there are 4 zero-day vulnerabilities released in this month's Patch Tuesday. Let me quickly show you where you would find zero-day vulnerability in our console. Let us navigate to the top menu, click on Threats and Patches. On the left pane, you find threats, and here you go, you find zero-day vulnerability. So as you can see, these are zero-day vulnerabilities listed. So let me go ahead and fix this vulnerability and click on Install Patches. It will automatically take you to manual deployment. By applying all these necessary configurations, you can successfully patch the zero-day vulnerability. So folks, due to time constraint, this was just a brief look into the zero-day vulnerability patching. To dive deeper into the capabilities of Patch Manager Plus, please take a moment to answer the poll shared in the chat so that we can arrange a full-fledged demo for you all. I shall pause for a couple of moments. Alright participants, let's delve into the zero-day vulnerabilities. The first zero-day vulnerability is CVE 2024-49040 found in Microsoft Exchange server, and this can cause spoofing. Although Microsoft is aware of this vulnerability, they haven't shared much about it yet on their MSRC blog. However, they have provided some details on what steps to take and actions to follow once the update is applied. It's important to note that this vulnerability has already been publicly disclosed. This has been assigned a CVSS rating of 7.5. Moving to the next zero-day vulnerability, CVE 2024-43451, found in NTML hash disclosure, and it is being actively exploited. This vulnerability can again cause spoofing. There's a serious security vulnerability out there right now that lets attackers grab a user's NTML v2 hash with just a little bit of user interaction. Essentially, if someone clicks on or right clicks a malicious file, they could unknowingly expose their NTML v2 hash. This is a big deal because that hash could then be used by attackers to gain unauthorized access to network resources, potentially putting an entire system at risk. The good news is that Microsoft has already rolled out a security patch to fix the issue. If you haven't already, it's crucial to apply the latest updates right away to protect your system. This has been assigned a CVSS rating of 6.5. The next zero-day vulnerability is CVE 2024-49039, found in Windows Task Scheduler. This vulnerability in it can cause elevation of privilege. This is a tricky zero-day vulnerability causing some trouble. It lets attackers sneak past the usual restrictions in a low privilege app container and run unauthorized code with higher privileges. This means they can escalate their access and use restricted functions like remote procedure calls, things normally only available to special accounts. It's a particular headache for Windows systems relying on Task Scheduler. This has been assigned a CVSS rating of 8.8. The last zero-day vulnerability of this month is CVE 2024-49019, found in Windows Active Directory Security Services. This vulnerability can cause elevation of privilege. Microsoft is again aware of this vulnerability, but they haven't shared many details yet. This has been assigned a CVSS rating of 7.8. Now let's move on to the critical vulnerabilities. We have 4 critical vulnerabilities this month out of the 89 total vulnerabilities. We have 84 important and 1 moderate vulnerability. Let's talk in detail about the critical vulnerabilities. The critical vulnerability CVE 2024-43498 is a remote code execution vulnerability affecting .NET and Visual Studio. If exploited, this vulnerability could let an unauthenticated remote attacker send a specially crafted request to a vulnerability. Moving on to the next critical vulnerability, CVE 2024-49056, and it is elevation of privilege vulnerability affecting Microsoft Airlift. An authentication bypass vulnerability on airlift.microsoft.com caused by assumed immutable data could potentially allow an attacker with authorized access to escalate their privileges across the network. This means that someone who already has some level of access could exploit the flaw to gain higher level permissions, increasing the risk of unauthorized actions or data exposure within the network. Moving to the next critical vulnerability, CVE 2024-43639. It's again a remote code execution vulnerability affecting Windows Kerberos. Windows Kerberos is the protocol that helps verify the identities of users and devices on a network. It relies on a key distribution center and symmetric key encryption to authenticate users, assuming that communication happens over an open network where data packets might be monitored or altered. Now, here's the kicker: an attacker, without needing to be authenticated, could craft a special app that takes advantage of a flaw in the Kerberos cryptographic protocol, potentially allowing them to execute malicious code remotely on the target system. Definitely not the kind of thing you want hanging around. And lastly, we have CVE 2024-43625, which is again an elevation of privilege vulnerability affecting Windows VM switch. A Microsoft Windows VM switch, or virtual switch as we call it, is a software tool that enables virtual machines to communicate with each other and connect to physical networks. To exploit this vulnerability, an attacker could first need to gather some details about the specific environment and set up the target systems accordingly. If they succeed, they could potentially gain system level privileges, giving them full control over the systems. Not at all a good situation for the target. Now, speaking about the patches by impact, as I mentioned earlier, that if these vulnerabilities are left unpatched, they can have 6 different kinds of impacts on your systems. Starting with 52 causing remote code execution, 28 causing elevation of privilege, 4 causing denial of service, 3 causing spoofing, 2 causing security feature bypass, and 1 causing information disclosure. Now let's take a look at the operating systems and the applications that have been affected this month. So as we saw earlier, there were a total of 89 vulnerabilities, out of which 37 have been found in Windows, 31 in SQL Server, 9 in Microsoft Office, 5 in developer tools, 4 in Microsoft Azure, and 2 in open source software. Dear participants, if you want the entire information about the Patch Tuesday updates, you can directly refer to ManageEngine's Patch Tuesday forum post that has been shared in the chat. We are glad to tell you that out of all the patches that have been released in November 2024, so far we support a total of 6,616 patches. So you can deploy these 6,616 patches using ManageEngine Endpoint Central, Patch Manager Plus, and Vulnerability Manager Plus.